Hello and thanks for joining me. Some of you may be able to tell I'm not in my usual location. I am traveling for work yet again this week. So I'm coming at you from my hotel room in warm and sunny Los Angeles, California. I actually went outside to see if I could find a location out there to film, but everywhere I could find that had a place to sit and whatnot had music playing here on the grounds of the hotel. So I just gave up and decided to come in and go ahead and film the chat for The Last Temptation of Christ by Nikos Kazantzakis, which is a book that I recently finished, and you probably can't tell. It's got this white background and gold lettering. It's difficult to tell the title here, but there is the cover. And I wanted to get this chat done, while it's still really fresh in my mind. And also, there was a movie adaptation of this novel done back in 1988, which I saw back when it was in theatrical release, and I decided to watch this again yesterday. So while it's still real fresh in my mind, I wanted to go ahead and get the book chat done. So this. The Last Temptation of Christ was originally published in Greek by Nikos Kazantzakis back in 1955, from what I can tell from the publication history, and it was published in English for the first time in 1960. And it was translated from the Greek by P.A. Bien, and the edition that I read is an electronic edition of a 1998 Scribner's, Scribner Paperback Edition, back from 1998. But why I wanted to read this, this came back on my reading radar because of I was watching the shelf tours over at Richardson Reed's channel. Did a bunch of shelf tours over the last few months, and this book came up, and I had forgotten about it. I had always kind of wanted to read it back when the movie came out. I saw the movie, and it really piqued my interest. And then a few years ago, I actually read The Gospel According to Jesus Christ by the Nobel Prize for Literature winning author Jose Saramago. And after reading that, it reminded me then again of, I really wanted to read The Last Temptation of Christ as well. And so, but I've forgotten about it again. So thank you, Mark over at Richardson Reads, for your shelf tour that prompted me, that got this back on my reading radar. And then I got it read off my priority reading theme this year. I had a theme of foundational beliefs or foundational myths. And so this sort of fit that criteria because definitely the Jesus story is what could be considered a foundational belief or a foundational myth. So speaking of that, I want to have a disclaimer before I go into what the book is about much, because when this book came out, it was very controversial because it treats, it's a fictionalized account. So it's not really based on the Bible version of Jesus and the disciples and etc. It is a fictionalized account of the last few probably weeks or months, last few months, I guess, of Jesus's life, and as well as the disciples and the other people that we know as from the Bible. But it's a fictionalized account. It's almost like Nikos Kazantzakis wrote a fan fiction, because I think he actually spent some time in a Greek Orthodox monastery. So I think he was respectful of the material, but not everybody saw it that way. And so the book was highly controversial, and the movie adaptation, when it came out as well, was highly controversial here in the U.S. anyway. And I also read that I believe it was in Paris that a theater was set on fire. So there was a lot of protests around the movie just because it treats some of the characters a little bit differently, as including Jesus, and which I'll discuss here more in a bit. So about the story, another disclaimer: spoilers. I don't know if there's really a danger of. Does anybody not know what happens in the Jesus, what happens to Jesus? If you don't know what happens to Jesus, and you don't want to know, and you don't want that spoiler, then don't watch the video, because I'm going to treat this video chat, like everybody kind of knows the general gist of the story, including, what happens to him at the end. So what it's about. It starts with Jesus as about, he's in his last months, so he's over 30 years old, and he's working as a carpenter, and he is actually building crosses for the Romans. So he's got this this job that sort of makes him an outcast among people to begin with. Remember, I'm not going by the Bible version of the Jesus story. I'm going by this fictional account. So, so he's got this. He's really upsetting a lot of people by sort of collaborating. It's seen by some with the Romans, including the Zealots, who are a group of Jewish people at the time who are plotting to rebel against Rome. And among those Zealots is Judas. And so this character Judas is going to is sent by the Zealots to actually kill Jesus. Jesus is struggling though, because he has this divine element. He thinks he's struggling with that, as well as just trying to, come to terms with it, I should say, I guess. He also has a history with Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene is a prostitute. We meet her early on in the novel. She is working as a prostitute, and she and Jesus have a past. It's not exactly explained what their past is, but they do have a past. And this past has been part of what has caused Mary Magdalene to go into prostitution, and at least Jesus blames himself for this largely. Well, Jesus ends up going to, he goes out to try to understand what he feels like his calling is, his divine calling. And he goes out to pursue that. His mother, Mary, really wants him to stay there and not be so strange and get married and have kids and basically live a normal, sort of maybe what we would call a middle-class life. But, this is not what he feels like he's called to do. So he goes to explore, his calling. And so he goes goes to a monastery. Judas is actually sent there to kill him. Through this whole process, but then changes his mind as Jesus starts talking about change, and Jesus' message is all about love and the changing, how to change people through love. Well, the story goes on, it's quite a long novel. It's actually over 500 pages, so I can't go through everything, but it's basically, he meets up with disciples. He kind of gets his message. He meets John the Baptist and is baptized by John the Baptist, and then, goes and starts working miracles and things. And so people start to wonder, he starts to wonder himself if he might be the Messiah. And the other disciples do as well. And so ultimately he winds up in Jerusalem and, runs afoul of the Romans. And, what happens, right? He winds up in front of Pontius Pilate, gets tried for, I think, blasphemy or something, because he had done, and also he was, I think it was crime against blasphemy, because he had gone into the temple and destroyed the money changers and whatnot, and really condemned them all. But anyway, he is condemned to be crucified then, and the last temptation, there is a little bit of a spoiler with the last temptation, what Jesus' last temptation actually is. So I don't think I'll give away the details of how that last temptation, his last temptation, I think it's obvious, or it's in the blurb for the book, is to be a normal person, to not be called to something greater, to actually just live a life, get married, have a family, work, be happy, have this kind of life. How that all transpires, I won't say, because it is kind of a twist at the ending there, so I won't give that away. But other thoughts about it. So about this movie adaptation from 1988, Scorsese was the director, Harvey Keitel played Judas, Barbara Hershey played Mary Magdalene, and David Bowie was our Pontius Pilate, which I had forgotten when I rewatched the movie yesterday. There were some differences, though, between the characters. The Judas character is portrayed very sympathetically. Jesus and Judas are almost a dual person. Judas wants to engage with the body. He wants to engage with revolution. He wants to attack Rome directly, with the Zealots. And Jesus wants to create change through changing people. So rather than making sort of political change, he wants to change individual people. And that's sort of their difference. But Jesus realizes, what he needs to do in order to make the change he wants to see happen he's going to need someone to betray him to the Romans, and he enlists Judas to do that. Judas is portrayed very sympathetically, in other words, in this narrative, as so is Mary Magdalene. Mary, his mother, is not so much, because she really wants to always pull him back to live a happy life, because she wants to keep him safe, because she loves him as a son. So, this is kind of where she's coming from with it. The other kind of character, one of the other disciples that I really thought was drawn really well was John. John, the beloved John. John was a very gentle person, and Jesus, beloved Jesus. Peter was a bit of a little bit of maybe a undependable, but also done very well. But the Jesus character, this humanity of Jesus, is something that I thought was really wonderful to explore. He's afraid. He has weaknesses. He has all the human frailties that that we all experience, right? And that this is portrayed very well in the book. I don't know that it was portrayed so well in the movie, because of course that's a different medium. So the personality of Judas, I don't know. With the Harvey Keitel, I think he did an okay job with this role in the movie adaptation, but I'm not sure that that whole thing came through. In other words, I think what I'm trying to say is the book's better, which is not. It's often the case, right? In the book we're able to go in depth and more into the characters than we are in the movie. The movie, of course, was a visual experience, and the book is really we really get into each of these characters. We don't learn about all the disciples in the book, all 12 of them, but we do learn about James and Peter, John, Judas, kind of those are the main ones that we interact with. Also, Simon of Cyrene, or whatever. I can't think. I'm probably mispronouncing that or remembering what his name is. But he was a tavern keeper. He actually comforts Jesus when he needs comfort really the most, and that was really kind of a beautiful, beautiful scene. So. I am so glad that I read this. It also, other thoughts before I close, though, this duality of Jesus, it really reminded me of a Hesse novel. I just finished reading Endymion very recently, but this duality of Jesus really was kind of what Endymion struggled with, and also what Steppenwolf struggles with in the Hesse novels. And this is, two of our natures. And I think all people do this, not just Jesus, but we all have one nature that's higher than our other nature. And so we have this struggle. I think all humans do. So that's why I think this book was so relatable. And I think why this Jesus, as portrayed in this book, was so relatable. And, I just thought it was a wonderful experience, and actually really quite beautiful in places. So, I think I will leave the chat with that. I am currently reading, I didn't pull it up, but I am reading By Desert, Steppe, and Ocean, A History of Eurasia, the continent of Eurasia, from about 10,000 BC to 1300 AD, which was by 1300 AD, the continent is sort of has recognizable features that we recognize today, but this is all sort of how this came to be, starting out about 10,000 BC. So this has been really good. My next read is going to be, I did a drawing for this over the weekend, it's going to be Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. So I'll be getting to that following By Desert, Steppe, and Ocean. So with that, I will close the chat. Until next time, take care.